Hello there, welcome to BCS, Chartered Institute for IT, which our first webinar that we're having after the COVID outbreak. Croeso i BCS, sefydliad siarsedig ar gyfer TIGA. I'm the secretary for the Chester and North Wales branch, and we're very fortunate today to have Hugh Valentine of Valto. He's going to give us a talk on Microsoft Teams and how it can be used in this period to get people working together remotely and using the cloud. We're hoping to run a few of these sessions, hopefully once a month. We're just in the process now of working out the next one. We'll let everyone know by the usual channels, which we've got on the screen here, and there'll be an email as well if you're joined onto our email list. If you're not, please email us or get in touch somehow through those lists, and we'll add you to the email list as well if you want to. So I'll hand over now to Hugh, and he will take us through Microsoft Teams and how it works and how we can all benefit from its features. Over to you, Hugh.
Thank you, David. So we'll jump into a quick presentation. So what we're going to talk about today is Microsoft Teams and how it can make working remotely more productive. So obviously a very topical presentation for the current situation. So a little bit about me. I'm Hugh Valentine. I'm a cloud consultant and managing director of Valto, and we kind of specialize in Microsoft 365 technology. So lots of stuff around Microsoft Teams at the moment. What we're going to cover today is an overview of what is Microsoft Teams and how it can be used and how it can help you work remotely. We're going to jump into the licenses, what licenses are available, which ones include Teams, which ones don't. We'll talk about the Teams features. So we'll be jumping into the chat, the actual Teams functionality, tagging Teams, files, all of that kind of stuff, and give you a good overview of how all this works. We'll then go into an overview of Teams Voice. So this is the capability that enables us to do phone calls via the same platform. We'll do some tips and tricks. So if you're looking to roll out Microsoft Teams and you want to get your departments utilizing this and your company's really taking full advantage of it, we'll give you some real life examples of how this works. We'll also look at the admin center and we'll talk about security and governance, some very important pieces of when we're looking to deploy and roll this out that we need to make sure we're aware of. We'll then wrap up kind of with EM&S, which is a security add-on that's available within some of the licenses, and it will greatly enhance the security of the platform. So we'll talk about how that can help as well. And then finally, we'll just do some questions and answers. So what I'd hope for today is we'll understand the licensing. You'll understand how you can deploy Teams across your organizations. We'll talk about how you can support your departments adopting this. We'll cover off security and governance, and we'll also explain how the voice features work. So I'd like to do a quick poll just to check who's currently using Microsoft Teams and get some feedback on that side of things as well.
So the results are currently 37% yes, they use it heavily, 41% yes, but they use it lightly, 4% of the audience are thinking about using it, and 19% of the audience are not using it, and that's represented about 47% of the people in this call, on this call.
Awesome, thank you very much. So obviously a lot of people have just started to utilize it. So this hopefully will give you some good tips and tricks to take away and really light up the adoption of this platform. So the first thing really is, what is Microsoft Teams? So what is the platform all about? So the people that have joined today that aren't using it currently, we'll jump in and we'll give an overview of how this platform works. So kind of the best way to do this is really just jump into an overview and show you the tool and show you how everything would work. So you can see here we've got the Teams application open, and what we'll see here down the left-hand side is all of the different functionalities that are available. Now the first one here is the simplest probably, the chat functionality. So chat here basically provides a channel to communicate with people inside your organization, and you can also chat with other people that are on the Microsoft Teams platform. So I can hit the little pencil icon up in the top. I can search for someone that works in our organization, and then I can send them a message to say, hello, how are you? So anybody that's currently using Skype for business, or perhaps even the personal version of Skype, this platform effectively looks to replace that. And as we go into the admin center later on, I'll show you how you can transition away from Skype for business and into Microsoft Teams. So very simple functionality initially. We can go and search for people. We can search for anyone who else is using Teams, provided your security allows that. Now, so a few of the strengths that we have over Skype for Business. The very first one in this is that I can actually scroll back and look through the history of conversations. So we are able to do that in a Skype, but it involves going into a folder in Outlook, and it's quite messy. Whereas with Microsoft Teams, this is easy to scroll through, and I can go back and find previous conversations as well. Now, also, I can access this on my mobile phone. So pretty much everything that I'm showing you, this same experience will work on your phones as well. So I could open up this same chat window with Steve, and I could go back and look at the histories of the conversations that I've had with him too. Within here, we've got video calls. So I could click this video call in the top right-hand corner and initiate a video chat with Steve. I could do a basic audio call, and I could also do a screen share, and I have the ability to share my screen or different apps that I currently have open. When I'm sending messages to Steve, I get a few things over Skype for Business. So the first one here is this little exclamation mark, where I'm able to set a message and flag that as an important or urgent message. So an important message just visually indicates that, hi, I need expenses today, can you send over? And when Steve sees that message, it'll pop up, and it's quite clear that that's an important message, so I'm expecting some feedback on it. I can also use the same option to do an urgent. So this will notify Steve every 2 minutes for 20 minutes. So perhaps notify him a few times and could be a bit annoying. But if I've got something really urgent, I could say, I've had a call, we need to get back to a client today. And I can then, that will start to notify Steve on all of his various devices. So this chat functionality is basically replacing Skype for Business, and largely it's the same kind of functionality with videos and calling and the screen sharing. The major part of Microsoft Teams is when we jump into the Teams section on the left-hand side, we have all of the teams that I'm currently a member of. So you can see I've got about 10 different teams that I'm a member of here. Now, the primary function of Microsoft Teams is it's designed to replace internal email. So it's kind of a modern communication platform. So lots of organizations are currently using applications like Slack, which is very similar. They might be using Zoom for video communications, and they might be then using emails. Now, the advantage of Teams has is it brings all of that communication into one platform. So it means that I don't have to have Zoom installed, I don't have to have Slack installed, I've got them all consolidated into one app. Now, down the left-hand side, every team that I'm a member of will appear here. And what we see Teams working really well for across different organizations are people are creating teams for the departments. So every department might have a Microsoft team created. So I've got a finance one here. I've got a demo finance project one. And also organizations are looking to create these for projects as well. So departments are a really good use case to help consolidate the emails that are sent out from there. And then for projects, which might involve multiple people from different departments and even people that are external as well. Now, the actual functionality of a Microsoft team. So down the left-hand side, I have what are called channels available to me. So every team that we create starts with a general channel. And what I can then do is I can come down into this start a new conversation section here, and I can tag the whole team. So by typing @team, that's basically going to get every single member of this team and send them a notification. So when I type in @team, you'll see it's popping up here with the demo finance. And what I'm able to do is I'm able to then send a message to say, we need to get month end reports complete today. And I can then send that message off. Now, because I've tagged that @demo finance, that means that everybody in this team will get a pop-up notification on their PC. If they've got it installed on there, they'll get it on their phones and all their other devices that they've got this configured. So just to understand how teams get created, on the left-hand side, right at the bottom here, I get an option here for join or create a team. So what I'm actually able to do in here is I can choose the create a team option, and I can then choose to upgrade what's called an Office 365 group. So if your organization's already used Office 365 groups, which are kind of a legacy version of Microsoft Teams, we can actually upgrade those directly from here. We can also choose build a team from scratch, and that gives me 3 different options that I'm able to pick from. So the first type of team is a private team. So they're perfect for perhaps the departmental functions where I might have a team for HR, and obviously we'd only want HR people to have access to that team. So it's restricting who can see that, and they would need to get approval to be able to join that. The second one is a public team. So this one basically is anybody can see this and they can search for them in the very top. So these are always good for things like perhaps for social teams. Some organizations might create a football team, and then anybody who's interested in football can join that team. Or perhaps it could be used for initiatives that you're using in the organization. You might be doing a mental health awareness, and people who are interested in that can then join as they need to. The final one is an org-wide team. So this automatically adds everyone in the organization, everyone who has a Teams license, into the platform, and they're then able to come into this and start to basically use the functionality. So the private teams are really good for restricted areas like departments and like projects where not everybody needs access. The public teams are good for not sensitive data. So like I said, initiatives, that kind of thing. And org-wide is really good for just getting everybody involved. And that can be a really good social tool as well then. When we create a team, so if we choose private, I can search for BCS as an example, and I can call this example team. One of the things to consider if you're starting to roll out teams is perhaps to look at some of the naming standards around how we're going to create these. So as an example, we have a naming standard that we use for any demo teams that we're creating. We call this demo. For any teams that we might be sharing externally, we prefix these with EXT. And we also then append projects that are for teams that are for projects with project as well. It just means that you've got a visual indicator. So we've got an externally shared team here. So that just means that we wouldn't put sensitive information in there, and we'd make sure we keep it to a professional level. So we give the team a name. We can then jump into a description. So I'm able to put what the team's for. So BCS demo team. And I can then hit create. And that creates the team. And I'm then able to add members into this then. So everyone who exists in the organization I can search for. So I can look for Office 365 users. I can add Steve into this. I could add Kyle as well into this as another user. And I can give users 2 types of permissions. I can give them a member permission, or I can upgrade them to an owner permission. Now, the difference between a member and an owner is owners can add more people and change people and remove people. And a member is only able to participate in the team. So they'd be able to add conversations, look at the files, that kind of thing. We can also add guest users on here. So if I wanted to add my Gmail account as a project, so this could be good for if you work with a supplier or you're working with customers and you want to be able to get them involved in the Microsoft team, we could search for anyone in the world and they can then join this team for free. So they don't actually have to have a license to do this. They're able to join and participate in a team without having to have any costs associated with them. They just need to create an account and then they're able to join and participate in this. So we've created our team here. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we get a general channel by default. So every team that we create has this general channel. And the idea of that is it's just where we start to put all of the communications. So as I said before, now we've got Kyle, Steve, and myself and this guest in the team. If I type the @team tag, I'm able to then tag the whole team and create a notification on their device. So I can say, welcome to the team. Are we ready to start this project? And then send that over. And now everyone can basically start to respond to this. I can immediately indicate that I've seen this message. So as I hover over this conversation, I can hit the like, or I can put the love icon, or whichever one, and I can then basically indicate that I've seen this. So this is quite handy. Quite often in a thread, we will say, can you please hit like when you've seen this message, just to indicate that we've seen that and we're ready to progress with stuff. Now, one of the common mistakes that people make when they get started with Teams, and you might see this if you're using Teams already, is that they'll start to put conversations in just below here. So they might start to say, yes, I'm ready. And what that's doing is it's creating an additional threads. So the problem with that is if we come to search for this afterwards and we try and find information, it's going to be very difficult because all the conversations are just a huge stream of chat. So it would be very difficult to find conversations and relate them to projects. So what we should be doing is hitting the reply under this thread, and I can say, yes, I'm ready. I'll start today. And effectively now we know that that posts in this thread. And as we go, if we go to a busy team, like my original finance team, it means that when we've got lots of conversations and threads going on, we're able to see and group them very easily. So when I'm coming back to search for this later on, there isn't just message after message after message. I think a lot of the reason why we get these kind of things is because WhatsApp is just a stream of chats, and so is Slack as well. So this is kind of introducing the threads, which are very key in making sure we can navigate and browse this effectively. I can hit this A icon in the bottom left-hand corner, and that basically then allows me to start to do a more detailed chat. So obviously these ones here, I've just put a basic one-liner, but perhaps I'm going to start to put some information on here. I could type in the subject section, project overview. I can come into here and I can do the @team tag again because I want to get everybody's attention. And I could say, we are due to start this project. Ignore my typing because it's trying to do it quickly. Here is the key information. And then with this, it's almost like having Word then. I'm able to start putting bullet points. So I said, we need to arrange access. I can put lots of different points in here, and I can start to formulate a more detailed thread, even doing things like strike throughs and highlighting certain content. So with this A icon, it gives us a lot of power of what we're able to create for a message. So when I hit the send icon, we've now kind of got this bolded section at the top, so it's clear. And if I was navigating this history of this team in the future, I'd be able to easily see different sections. So I might then have another one called phase 2. And I could then start to tag people and start to do that. So the whole idea of these threads is it just makes it easier to navigate. And from a user perspective, it's then very visual to use. I can also tag individuals. So perhaps in this BCS project, I need to get Steve's attention. I'm waiting for him to do a pending client feedback. So I can tag only Steve in this. And what that basically means is it's going to pop up for Steve, but everyone else will be able to see this conversation. So perhaps I've tagged Steve in to say, we need to get the feedback today, and then send that over. If somebody else in the team then suddenly decided, oh, I need to chase Steve for the same thing, when they come into this project, they'll see that I've already done it, and then they won't do the same. So it's reducing the repetition. So obviously, as I said at the beginning, the whole idea and concept of Microsoft Teams is it's a modern communication platform, and lots of organizations are using this to get rid of internal emails. So we don't send any internal emails at all. We have external emails for when we're dealing with clients and we're not able to get them to join a team. But anything that's to do with a project or customer issues, we put these into the team and then we tag people in. And if you imagine that when you come off a holiday for 2 weeks and you've got your usual inbox where you've got 1,000 emails, and as you start to work through them, by the time you get to the top, you've noticed a lot of those have already been actioned and you've wasted a lot of time. If it was in Teams and you come back off your holiday, because everything's threaded, when we come to open this team, you're going to see what the subject is and the latest response. So we see a lot of time saving there because we're not duplicating how much time is needed to get up to speed with things. So real key of a productivity tool and getting rid of those internal emails. We're also able to, within a team, have a file section. So by default, every team has this files tab, and lots of organizations are transitioning away from traditional file servers. They're not using a file server to store their files. They're looking to migrate into this platform and also consolidating other apps. So perhaps you're using Dropbox or Box or something like Ignite. Again, this Teams application is consolidating those applications. So we don't pay for Dropbox as well and don't have a file server. You can really look to start to consolidate and bring those into this environment. With the actual files functionality, if I jump into a finance area and choose the files tab, I can access those files in this Teams interface and I can view them. I could open this public liability document as an example. And on the right-hand side, I'm able to provide feedback on it. But if I was to want to view this in a more traditional view, like a file server type interface, if I hit the sync icon at the very top, that creates a folder on my PC. So you can see here, I've got a folder called Valto, and then all of the teams that I've synced are available in this list. So my demo finance one is available, and I can then browse this folder infrastructure just as if it was a network drive then. We get quite a lot of cool functionality that wouldn't be available as part of this usually. So you'll notice next to each of these, I've got a cloud icon. So the cloud icon indicates that I can access and view those files in the browser, but I can't actually, if I didn't have an internet connection, I wouldn't be able to download this. So the cloud icon just lets me see them, but it doesn't consume any storage on my PC. It just means that I can see them just like a network drive. If I use files a lot, so I might say I need this management accounts folder, I can right click on it and I can choose always keep on this device. So that'll turn to a dark green tick like this finance folder has. And that basically means it's now synchronizing a copy on my PC. So if I was traveling on a train or out and about at customers, or perhaps I'm even working at home and I have a really poor internet connection, I'm able to take a copy of those files and I'm able to then work on those files and make changes, and any changes are then synchronized automatically into the Teams place. If I open a file that's stored in Teams, what we get is quite a lot of different functionality. So the first thing that we get in the top left-hand corner is this autosave functionality. So that basically means as I make changes to the file, it's automatically saving it, and nothing revolutionary there, but it just means that if we forget to save it, we're not going to lose any of our changes. The next thing that I've got is version history. So every time I make a change to this file, it'll create a new version of the file, and I can even go back to a previous version and I can look at the comments and restore that back if I need to. So the version history is kind of really easy to access through this. I've also got the share option in the top right-hand corner. So I've got a few different sharing options. You'll see this first one here, anyone with a link is grayed out. So for every single team, I'm able to define what sharing I want. So for finance, sharing anyone with a link probably isn't the most secure method. So we've actually looked to disable that. But what the anyone with a link option would do is if I just quickly open up another file to show you. So bear with me a second. So when I hit the share option in here, I'm able to choose anyone with a link, and I'm able to basically give the user editing access. I can choose an expiry date, so I can say that this could expire at the end of the month, and I'm also able to set a password. So I could have no password at all, I could set no expiry, and it just simply creates a live link to this document. So it's very handy for quick sharing. So I might want to share a folder with a supplier, or I might want to share a proposal document, and that anyone with a link just really simplifies that experience for a user. It means they don't have to log in. You can secure it with a quick password, but it makes it a simple experience for people to jump on. People in Valto with a link basically is a link that I can share with everyone in the organization. So if we imagine that this team is locked down to only finance members, there's going to be cases and scenarios where I want to share a particular folder or a file with everybody else in the organization. So I'm able to use the people in Valto with a link to just give people access to that file. And that saves me then duplicating a file and emailing a copy to people. Everyone will get a live view of this document. People with existing access allows me to just give a link. So if I've already shared it with someone previously and I want to just give them a link, I can use this option. And the specific people allows me to then share either with internal people, so I could search for Steve again and give him access to this file, or I could even search for someone externally as well, and they can have access and it will warn me that Hugh is outside of the organization. So obviously anyone with a link can enable external sharing. Specific people can enable external sharing, but this specific people is more secure. So when I receive a link through the specific people, I will receive a code to verify my identity, and I can then sign in with an account. So it could be a live account or an Office 365 account, and that'll then give me access. So kind of anyone with a link is kind of not secure really, and then specific people is the most secure method for sharing files externally. If I open up if I was to send this file to Steve, you'll notice in the top right hand corner, I've got a picture of myself. If I was to share this file with Steve and he opened it at the same time, we'd all be able to work on this file and make changes to it in real time as well. So real-time collaboration is enabled. And the way that works is my cursor would show up here as yellow and I can make changes here, whereas Steve could be working in this section of the document and also make changes. So if you're working on a proposal and you're trying to get that done quickly, this kind of sharing really enables a collaboration and saves a lot of time there. The backbone of Microsoft Teams is SharePoint. So they're doing lots and lots of things to really hide this now. So you can do a lot of the functionalities without ever having to actually go into SharePoint. But for anybody that's interested, we're actually able to come into the SharePoint side of things. And there's a SharePoint homepage, which can be used for building kind of a basic department page of sharing information. But all of the functionality for people that have used SharePoint before is available in the background of this as well. So all Teams is really doing is really simplifying the experience for how this works. They're getting rid of a lot of the permissions of SharePoint and just trying to make it really simple for people to adopt. So the files and the conversations can work really well together. So if I was to do a conversation down the bottom here, I could tag the team and I could say, can I get feedback on this document, please? And I can hit this paperclip icon down the bottom. And I can then choose the browse team and channels. And this allows me to browse the finance files. So I can choose this public liability and I could choose share a link. I'll give it a subject so it's clear, public liability feedback. And then I can send that off. Now, anyone who receives this message, if they're on their phone, they can simply tap that on their phone and they're able to open the document and provide really quick feedback. On my PC, I can hit this document, and on the left-hand side, the document's opened, and I'm actually able to come in here and make changes to it quickly. So if I've noticed that I've made a spelling mistake or Steve's made a spelling mistake as I review it, I'm able to very quickly on the fly just adjust and make changes to this. On the right-hand side, I can start to then provide feedback. So I can say, Steve, I think page 2 looks messy. Can we reword? And then obviously I've got this conversations ability, and then Steve could come back and say, that's fine. So this kind of modern communication is really fantastic, and it streamlines a lot of the processes and saves us sending those emails back and forth. I can also, in the bottom right-hand corner here, I can hit this video icon and I can do a meet now. So obviously it's great that we're sending lots of messages back and forth, but eventually it might just get to the point where we could have a conversation with Steve and get it sorted quickly. So I can hit the video icon in the bottom right-hand corner, and I can hit this meet now. And then what that enables me then to do is I'll turn the camera off and hit meet now. I'm then able to, I won't do the meet now functionality because I think it'll affect my audio. So what I can do with the meet now though is I can start a video chat within this thread. I'm able then to drag everybody in. So I could drag Steve onto that conversation, and you'll see here that I've got the log of the meeting, and I'm able to then go back and play that back. I can also record that meeting. So I'll look through here and I'll find an example, but you'll see here through all these threads, I'm able to easily browse what I'm looking for. And within one of these, you've got the ability to record a meeting as you do it. I'll get to one eventually. And I'll be able to, usually there'll be one much sooner, but effectively I'm able to find a video in this list and I'll be able to play that back and have a look. So the kind of Meet Now functionality is very good, and it enables you to do the recording so that anybody that wasn't able to join that meeting can then easily play that back. The other functionalities around Microsoft Teams, so we've covered off the A, we've covered off the pay-per-click, which allows us to integrate with the files. We can do things like basic emojis and post those within here. We can do GIFs. So as an example, one of the cool things I like in here is this praise option. So if someone's done a particularly good job, I can choose an option in here like team player. I can then say that Steve's done a great job. I could say, thanks, Steve, really good work on the project. And I can then hit the preview and you'll see that's created a nice badge then for everybody to come in and have a look. So when I hit send, that's posted in as a message. So everyone can then use, as I said before, they could hit these emojis to say that they've liked it. But the GIFs are then quite good to have a bit of fun. So within here, we could search for a well done GIF and we could then post that in. So Teams isn't really just about all work all the time. We can actually use the GIFs to have a bit of fun within there and do that kind of thing as well. The next thing really is around the channels. So every team, it can be broken down into multiple channels. So if you imagine that this finance team's got 50 members and there's lots of threads that are getting posted all the time in here, this could be very difficult to navigate. If there was more than 10 messages going on, it would be very difficult to find different conversations and see what's going on. So what I'm able to do down here is I can hit these three dots and I can choose the add channel option. So within here, I can say I'm going to break a channel up and I'm going to call this one payroll info. I've got two types of channel that I can create. A standard one, so that means that everybody in the finance team will have access to it and they'll be able to participate and see everything. Or I can create a private one. So a private one's very handy for within finance. We've got 50 people. Only 3 or 4 people from the finance team actually need to see payroll information. So I can change this to private and I can then create that and then add in the people from within this team. I can only add in people from the finance team. A private channel doesn't allow me to invite someone who doesn't belong to the team. So it's not a way to share outside of that group. So I'll skip that. And what we've got now here is a separate posts area and a separate files area. So what it basically does is provides a completely separate chat. So if it's a really busy team and everyone has access to it, we can use it to create posts around there. It creates a files area. So I can see I've got an accounting section. So that basically just creates a subfolder within the platform. It's nothing fancy, it's a subfolder. Whereas a private channel has a completely restricted files section that's actually in a completely isolated area as well. So this is a very secure way of storing additional files in here too. The other thing really with a team is we can have different tabs. So if I hit the add a tab option, I've got loads of different tabs that I can pick from. So as part of the security and governance piece that we'll talk about towards the end, we probably want to consider disabling these because it's a shadow IT nightmare. I mean, people will just come in and go, what's Skilla be? And off they go setting up new apps. So it's not really ideal that they have this capability, and we can actually lock down that. But there are some good apps in there. So we've got things like the ability to integrate with Office 365 apps. So I can integrate with Excel, Forms, SharePoint, Stream. I've got some examples across the top here. So Wiki is a really good area for storing like a knowledge base for a department. So I've got in this finance one some procedures on how they would update Sage and how they'd log in. And I can build a navigation down there. So if you're a new starter joining this team, hopefully it's really easy and simple to find what we're looking for. Planner's also a good one. So every team can have a planner. And it's basically a very simple, anyone who's used Trello will be familiar with this kind of interface, but within a planner, I'm able to basically create buckets across the top. So I'm able to jump into, here I've got one for month end and finance, and I can create a new bucket, and it's just basically then a group of tasks. So I've got one for SharePoint deployment. I can create a new one. So I could say month end rollout. I could set a due date for the tomorrow, and I can then assign that to the members of the team. So I can give this to Steve to do and add that task. And the idea of the buckets is you can just move the tasks between there. So they're quite handy for perhaps if you've got multiple stakeholders or departments and you want to move it across, or they could be gates in a project, it's up to you. And then we're able to tick these projects off and mark them as completed. So Planner is just a really good task management system. And obviously in the current climate, if you're struggling of ways to get people to manage their to-do lists and their tasks, this is a really good tool. And a very, very quick jump into another product that's really good that ties in with this, which is To-Do. So this is a To-Do basically allows you to create lists. So I can create a list for internal or marketing tasks, but this integrates with Planner as well. So if I click on Assign to You, I can see all the tasks from Planner across all the different planners consolidated, and I'm able to right click on things that I plan to do today and click Add to my day. And that gives me then a list, a to-do list of tasks that I'm working on in the day. So Planner is a really good shared task area. To-Do brings that to the user and then gives you a to-do list that's personal to that user, and they can plan their tasks across all sorts of areas. They're also adding in some new functionality to this planner, so they're revamping this with Teams tasks very soon. So I'd advise that if you're starting to use Teams, you really look into this. We've also kind of got other tabs, so we can put Google as a tab at the top there. We could pin an Excel file. So buried in this file section, we might have a rota. So we could just pin that to the top so people in the finance team can easily find the rota. And we can then do things like add Power BI reports and all sorts in there. So the tabs really just make it easy to find information. So people who have started to adopt this are using Teams as their main tool. They're opening Teams and they'll live their work life in that application very much like we do in Outlook at the moment. We also then have the calendar option. So this isn't anything special really. All this is simply syncing with your Outlook calendar. So it just shows you your Outlook calendar. And from within here, we've got a couple of options. So the first one I'm able to do is I can do a meeting. So I can schedule a meeting and I can invite either staff that I work with, or I can invite external parties. I can also do a live event. So if you're looking for a tool that can help you do webinars and that kind of thing, the live event functionality is very good for doing that and will help you basically do something similar to what we're doing with GoToWebinar. I'm also able to go into Outlook itself and I can choose a time slot, and I can choose the new Teams meeting option just here. And that basically will kick off a Teams meeting. And again, I can invite everyone in. So using the calendar tab here or using your Outlook calendar are ultimately the same thing. They provide the same kind of functionality. We'll come back to calls later on, but I can also add other tabs. So as an example, we have a SharePoint intranet, and we've pinned this to a tab on the left-hand side. And it just basically means that we don't have to go into SharePoint to view our intranet. We've got it all in one place. So this kind of makes it very easy for users to stay in Teams and not have lots of apps available to them. With the licenses, so we'll jump over. So that gives an overview of how Microsoft Teams works and a lot of the functionality, and we'll kind of revisit a couple of these sections as we go through the rest of the presentation as well. So that's an overview of Microsoft Teams. Now, people will be wondering what licenses this is available with. So there's been quite a few changes with the Office 365 licenses recently. So I wanted to just go through and explain what those changes are and make people aware of what the licenses are. So when Microsoft when Office 365 first launched, we were given the Office 365 tag, and that's kind of what it was called. It was called Office 365, and one of those licenses was called the Office 365 Business Premium. So this has been one of the most popular licenses that's been available. It includes everything that I've showed you today. So it includes Teams, SharePoint, Exchange, Power Apps. It includes the ability to install Office. And then we've got the E3 licenses. So these kind of licenses are the ones that if you've got more than 300 users, you're generally looking at these licenses. And it also includes some additional compliance tools. So it includes things like retention and legal hold. So you'd either be using this one for smaller organizations, or if you had some legal hold requirements or you had more than 300 users, you'd be looking at this one. Now, very recently, they've renamed those licenses to the Microsoft 365 Business Standard. So this one's now be changed. And in a couple of slides, I'll go through that. As part of Office 365, as it developed further, Microsoft then created a new license plan called EM&S, or Enterprise Mobility and Security. And this license aimed at providing additional security tools like Azure AD Premium, conditional access, and some others which we'll go over briefly today to show you what those are about. So there was the Office 365 licenses, and then you'd purchase this EM&S add-on, but it was getting quite confusing, I think, for people when they're buying the licenses. There's too many add-ons. So Microsoft basically created what's called the Microsoft 365 licenses. So by far the best license now is this Microsoft 365 Business Premium license. It still has a cap of 300 users. So again, if you're a large enterprise, you'd be falling into one of these, but it includes everything in Office 365. And then it includes the additional security tools. So it includes things like Intune, which is for device management. It includes Azure Information Protection, conditional access. There's lots of stuff in this license. So even though it's been a very confusing process to get these licenses renamed, I'm hoping now in the future that this is going to be easier for people to understand and go forward with. But these are kind of the plans that are available. Microsoft are also giving Microsoft Teams away for free at the moment. So if you don't have Office 365 and you don't have any licenses, there's two ways. You can either download Teams directly and get that license plan through that method. Or the second way is they're actually offering what's called the E1 license, and they're giving that away for free for 6 months. So usually there'll be a cost of about £5 with that, but they're giving it away to people for 6 months for COVID-19 to help people be able to work and start to utilize these teams and the other features to work remotely effectively. So that's kind of an overview of Microsoft 365 licenses. So obviously lots of people are trying to deploy Microsoft Teams very, very quickly. So you might be in a position where you've launched this as quickly as you can to try and get things going. So there's just a few tips here on if you're planning on quickly deploying Teams and what you can do to smooth this process. The first one is check the settings in the admin center. So obviously to get onto Teams really quickly, lots of companies have made sacrifices of security and governance and putting all that stuff that takes time in place. But looking in the settings of the admin center is very important, and I'll go through some of those settings with you shortly. For users that are deploying Teams, I would really encourage users to deploy this on all devices. So we would want to deploy it on their PCs, their phones, if they're happy with it, because the beauty of Teams is that when you've got it set up on your phone and your other devices, you can quickly access and communicate while you're on the move. Provide hardware to people. So I think it's really important that people get good headsets, they get nice web cameras that they can use. If people are working from home now because of COVID-19, I really think it's important that people can use the video chat, they can have a headset, and it really engages people and perhaps gets rid of that stigma of working from home and makes you feel like you're still part of a team and part of the office. If you can't get the hardware, because there is a lot of shortages, back to my point on deploy all devices, if people have phones, they have built-in web cameras, they have built-in microphones. So if we can encourage people to use their phones, they're still able to use the video chat and that kind of thing. Lots of organizations have just rolled out Teams with very little training and with very little guidance. So I would recommend that you give your users some structure and some guidance in this area. One of my favorite free tools that's available is if you go to teamsdemo.office.com. This is an interactive demo. And if I hit Let's Get Started, so this is an interactive web page, which is basically a mock interactive demo of how Teams works. And as I click Next, it guides the user and explains kind of what Teams are, what channels are, how conversations work. So this is a very easy to give tool to show people how they can start to utilize Teams and do that kind of thing. And it even has interactivity where it's asking me to reply in here and say hi. So this is quite a good training tool. There is also lots of resources. We have quite a few videos on our YouTube channel as well. So we've done quite a lot of free videos to help people get up to speed and Teams training sessions. So have a look on our channel for that. The guide your users piece. So if your company's looking to roll out Teams and you really want to try and give people a jump start on how it works, one thing we found that's been very effective is to look at creating a cheat sheet for those departments. So this is a very simple one, but all we're doing with the cheat sheet is we're basically mapping how that department would used to work in the office. So a very common thing that people do in the office environment is they have a daily stand-up where they'll all stand around the desk and say what their plan is for today. So within our cheat sheet, we would map their office way of working to the remote way of working. So a daily catch-up would become, as an example, a daily thread in Microsoft Teams. So I would simply create a thread here. I'd call it today's date. I'd invite the team and I can say any issues or topics for today, post below. And then that kind of is the daily thread then. For non-important things, we could put those in. But we can also then define a call structure. So lots of companies have just let people find their own way with Teams, but we find it's good, perhaps just give users a guidance. So we say, as an example of what we do a call in the morning. So at the start of every day at 8:30, we have a general catch up. And that's not just work, we do a lot of social around that. So it's, how are you? Do you have a good evening? Then we talk very briefly as a whole company about what our tasks are for the day and any issues that we have. We do one at lunchtime, which kind of just is a quick catch up and more social. We don't have that as a work heavy call. We're using that as a because obviously everyone's working from home. It's difficult to remember the social pieces. So our lunch call is basically just a general, have a cup of coffee, have a general chat and just promote that kind of thing. And then finally, at the end of the day, we do a closeout call, which is similar to the morning call. How did today go? Has there been any issues? That kind of thing. So within our cheat sheet, we kind of do weekly catch-ups as well. So a daily catch-up's a quick 15-minute call. A weekly catch-up might be an hour that we record that meeting so people can play that back as well. Again, replace internal emails. So if you do want people to start replacing internal emails, unless you tell them that and then start to structure that, that's not going to happen. So our cheat sheet, again, is aimed at doing that. And then we've got all sorts of other things about tabs and devices and stuff. And in my example team here, I've even pinned that finance cheat sheet to the top of the team, so it's easy for people to find. So I'd really recommend that you don't just let people go off. They will find their own way probably eventually. But if you want to speed that process up, just document it, create a simple one-pager, tell them what the aim is for Teams and tell them how they can achieve that and give them a structure, and you'll find that will really help light up the Teams adoption. The last piece is user specialist, obviously. So a company that might provide additional services. So they might do Teams training. They might help you set up the configuration and all of that kind of thing. So governance is an important piece. So there's a lot of stuff that we need to consider as part of Teams. So I would really recommend as an organization, if you've already deployed Teams and you haven't done this, then I would recommend you take some time and go through the Teams admin center. So when we go to the admin center of Office 365, down the left-hand side, I have one here called Teams. What Teams basically allows me to do is this is all of the settings that I have available for Microsoft Teams. So pretty much everything I can configure, conversations, all that kind of stuff's available in here. Now, I won't go through every single option because we haven't got enough time, but some of the key areas. The first one here is Manage Teams. So I can see a list of all the teams that have been created, and I can see a list of who's created the teams and how many members they've got and all that kind of stuff. Now, a lot of things we see with organizations is because by default, I can choose this create a team and anyone can create a team, we get something called team sprawl. Team sprawl basically is where people have just gone nuts creating teams. You might have a finance team, you might have an accounts team, you'll get all sorts of teams. And a really common thing we see is people are saying that they're teamed out. I don't know which team I should use. Should I use the accounts team? Should I use the finance team? It's just out of control. So within this teams place, we'll be able to have a look and see what teams you've got. And there is a way to disable group creation. Now, unfortunately, it's not a toggle in the background. There's an article, so who can create groups. And then there's a piece of PowerShell command that we can run here. And that allows us to control actually who can create those teams and limit it to just certain people. And that'll certainly help with the who can create them. Another tip while we're on here, I find it's really important for you as an organization to define your teams in the initial phase. So if your plan is to use it for departments, then get those departments created and set up. If you're going to use it for projects, similar to how I showed the department cheat sheet, you should really have a design of what your plan is for using teams. Otherwise, it might just grow organically and you'll lose control and you won't have this team sprawl that I mentioned. So really spend a bit of time brainstorming how that's going to work and what you want your teams to look like. Other key areas in here, we can jump into kind of like meeting policies. So we're able to basically define if I set up a meeting, whether people can share their screen, whether guests can share their screen. So there's lots of controls in here. One of the ones I really recommend is around the manage apps. As I said before, within this section, we have one called org-wide app settings, and we can disable third-party apps. So if you're concerned about shadow IT and you don't want people going off creating hundreds of apps, then this is one to look at in here. Finally, obviously there's loads of settings, but the guest access is another key one. So if you want to be able to invite people externally into your teams, this has to be switched on. And similarly, if you don't want people to be able to do that, this has to be switched off. So this toggle is quite important. Finally, the SharePoint, obviously I mentioned that Teams sits on SharePoint as the back end. So the SharePoint settings are very important as well. And the main ones within here are the settings section. And we then have one called, policies and then sharing. And then within here, we can define on what sharing levels we can have. So whether it's anyone, new and existing guests, or if you don't want people to be able to share, we need to lower this setting down to something that you're comfortable with. So we can do that under the sharing and apply that to everything. Or you can go into sites and you can search for an individual site and you can change the sharing settings on those individual sites as well. So governance is important. Those settings are critical. The security piece we'll touch on lightly at the end around the additional tools. Adoption's important, and we just talked about training and some of the resources that are available to you. So really think about training users, giving them materials like a cheat sheet. Look at getting devices, and obviously make sure those external sharing settings are set to something you're comfortable with, because you don't want loss of data. There's also an add-on for Teams telephony. So effectively, Teams can be used as a full phone system as well. So I have here this calls tab, and I've then got the option in here to dial a number. So I'm able to actually send a call out and people can dial this number and I'll receive a call, or I could phone someone here like a mobile phone number and I can then call that. So this can replace your phone system, and it does everything that you would expect a phone system to do. So it can have a auto attendant where you phone a mainline number and it says press 1 for sales, press 2, all of that kind of stuff's available. And then all of the users can have direct dial numbers as well. One of the really cool things of the call-in is the user can come into the settings and they can choose calls, and they've kind of got their own abilities in here to do things like forward calls. So if they're not going to be available, they could forward them to a coworker, or if they want to forward them to their mobile, they're able to do that. And the voicemail is really cool as well. So we can actually get the voicemail to play your Outlook reply. So if your phone system's in Teams, you can set an out of office agent. And when users then phone your number, if you've got an Outlook auto reply saying you're not available, the out of office voicemail greeting will play that automatically. So the phone system is very good. It's perhaps lacking in some of the reporting functionality. So if you're a contact center, you're looking to do call recording or really do a lot of reports on the voice side of things, it's probably not the right solution. But if you're looking to just replace a very simple phone system, it's a good solution. And the costs for that are, we need to add this onto one of the business licenses, and it costs £12 per user per month. And that includes 1,200 minutes. It includes audio conferencing. So when I set up a Teams meeting earlier on, I was able to have this dial-in capability. So it provides this included. If you're not interested in the phone system, but you are interested in this dial-in capability, that's available separately as well for £3 a user a month. So that's quite handy. So some quick tips that you can action today. So obviously convert your departments to remote working, so that we find that that department cheat sheet really helps with that, but really think about how you can get people working remotely and do that. We kind of not enforce, but we're making sure that our employees are taking regular breaks and being healthy. So it's really easy to just be sat at your computer all day and not really move around. So we're promoting regular breaks, we're promoting those social chats, and we're promoting people to go out as well and make sure that you haven't done 10 steps in a day, and really encouraging that kind of things. Obviously, you can use Teams effectively. So things like the threads that I showed you, the tagging, those are really key. Use Microsoft 365 effectively. So there's lots of things in Microsoft 365 like Planner, To Do, Stream. There's loads of other things really that can help and support Teams. So have a look at those. And then the final thing is promote social and fun. So I'll touch on this lightly. Every Friday we do a happy hour, which basically everyone's involved in, and we use Teams then to facilitate that. So we do things like a company quiz, and all have a drink and basically have some fun. And we've even invited customers and partners along to that as well, just to really encourage and have fun around this. So don't just make Teams all about work, put fun communications on there, use it for social chats, that kind of thing. There's some useful links. So these are be available on the recording. So the Success with Teams link is a link that Microsoft have put all their materials, how to roll Teams out, how to security and compliance. There's loads of useful things in here. The roadmap is showing the upcoming features. One thing that's really requested is the 9 videos. At the moment, Teams only shows 4, but 9 is coming soon. So the roadmap shows those kind of changes. The Teams demo site, which I showed earlier, is really handy. And then they got the working from home remotely blog. So this is just one of our blogs where we've put a lot of these tips and tricks into an article to make it easy for people to find. So the final piece really before we move on to questions and answers, and I'll fly through this, are the additional tools that are available in enterprise mobility and security. So Office 365 is available once you have an account, you can sign in on that by default to any device on any PC. So potentially your users could log in from their home PCs, their home phones, and by default, you wouldn't have any control of that. So if you've moved all your files into there and they've then moved their files onto the home PC, you might have a salesperson that downloads everything and takes it away, or you just might have someone that's got no antivirus on their PC and they get malware attack and they then attack your environment. So we really want to try and lock that down. And one of the key tools that we can do with this, which is included in the Microsoft 365 Business Premium license, is conditional access. So conditional access lets us define all kinds of rules on how people can access Office 365. So as an example here, I've got one called block non-compliant devices. So what this one does is it basically blocks home PCs. So we're saying if you're not, if you've got your home PC, we don't trust that. We're not going to allow that access. The second one, restrict non-compliant devices. This one actually allows them to log into Teams, but it puts it into web-only mode. So they're not able to sync any data. They're not able to use Outlook or the client or anything like that. It puts it in a very limited mode where they can use the browser, but it can really minimize how much damage they could do. We've kind of got this MFA trusted locations. So if you don't have MFA switched on your Office 365 environment now, you should definitely do that as the first thing because it stops most attacks. MFA is basically a secondary form of authentication. So when someone signs into 365, they validate their sign in with their phone or an app. But obviously that can be quite onerous. So if you've got lots of users and they don't want to use their personal phones, we can have a trusted location policy. And what this allows us to do basically is define conditions. So a condition I could say is exclude all trusted locations. So that basically means then if I'm in my head office or any of our office locations, we've got all the trusted IP addresses. So this will bypass the requirement for MFA when they're at one of those trusted locations. So it removes a lot of the overheads of MFA. We can also do things like check if the device is Azure AD joined or if it's compliant. So again, if we've issued the device to someone and we know it's secure and we know it's got everything on, we don't need to prompt them for MFA because we already trust that device. So conditional access really lets us build lots of rules on how people can access Office 365 and Teams and really limit what they can do on non-trusted devices. The second one of interest is a product called Intune. Now, Intune can do absolutely loads, and it's a device management and it's an app management tool. So I'm not going to go into everything on it, but one of my favorite features that can really massively help with security is in this client's app section. We have what are called app protection policies. So if I've got Teams on my personal phone, we don't really have control over that personal phone, and generally employees aren't going to be comfortable if we say, well, actually we're going to put some software on there that lets us wipe your phone and all your personal pictures. They're not going to be happy with that, and we do want them to use Teams on their phone because it's going to help with productivity. So what an app protection policy allows us to do is basically say, right, if anybody installs any of these applications on their phone, whether it's a work phone or a personal phone, so Teams is in this list, when we're going to apply some policies, but we're only applying the policies to the app. We're not going to touch the rest of your phone. We can't wipe your cat pictures. We're just going to control the apps that are available on here. So what I can do is I can prevent backups. So I don't want them to be able to back up to iTunes as an example. I can stop them from copying data. So I could say, you're only allowed to copy data between these apps and I can containerize them. I can stop them from being able to, I can encrypt it. So we can encrypt those apps so nothing else on the phone can access them. And I can even enforce a PIN when they open that app. So we can say, right, you need to use Face ID when you open the app. So this is a very, very powerful thing that would allow us to control the apps when we've rolled out Teams. And then if that user leaves the business or they lose their phone, we can do an app selective wipe, and that enables us then to just wipe the apps off that user's phone. So it means I'm not then wiping off all of their personal data and their personal phone, but I have a very high level of control over that device and the information that's contained within there. So EM&S contains lots of tools and lots of products that can help with that, but those two are the key ones that can really help secure your Office 365 and Microsoft Teams environment. So that kind of jumps us over into the questions and answers then. So hopefully David's around with some questions.
Hello, yes, I'm here. We've got a couple of questions that have come through. One of them is, why does chat save all the attachments in the files? So Anne's having a bit of trouble when she's saving the chats. It becomes a bit messy when all the files are saved.
So unfortunately, some of the kind of, if you're using the add attachment and you choose upload, so within here, if you click upload from my computer or in the chat itself, it kind of just dumps them into random locations. So there isn't really anything you can do for that. I would recommend just to put the file into a team first in the file section and then use the link to post to that instead.
Okay, that's good. And then we've also got problems joining other people's Teams sessions as a guest. So I'm thinking the reason there is what you've explained previously, the settings of the other persons or the other organization, how they've set that stuff up.
Yeah.
But
one thing to be aware of is that in the top right hand corner of my Teams, I have a list of organizations that I've joined. So you might find if you've been invited to lots of Teams as a guest, you need to click into one of those in the top right and switch to their environment, and you might find that works then. That's
okay.
improving it. It's getting a lot better as well, that switching capability.
It does seem to be improving all the time, doesn't it, Teams? It's pretty good. The other issue there was that I think just finding issues with Skype taking over and blocking other software like Zoom and stuff like that. So I don't know if you've got any thoughts on how Skype, I guess Skype though will be stopped in the relatively near future.
Yeah, so you can, if you've got Skype for Business deployed, you can go into the admin center of Teams and you're able to put yourself into Teams only mode, which basically removes Skype and prevents messages from coming through from that. In terms of the audio thing, that kind of obviously during my presentation, as I jumped into the video, Teams overtook the audio as well. So I'm not sure if I blipped out for a minute, but there is issues around all these different chat programs and they do try and take over. So I've just removed Skype for Business altogether and try and minimize having multiple communication tools open at the same time.
Can we deploy Intune policies retrospectively after the user has installed apps to their mobile devices?
Yeah, so if I was to create that policy I showed earlier on, when I click on the assign option, so when I'm in here and I go to my client apps, as soon as I create an app protection policy, I can assign this to every employee or just certain ones, and then that will then go off and the user will say, we're just putting a new policy on Teams, and then it'll kick in.
Okay. How does Teams handle GDPR if you're sharing across country boundaries? And is there any control of where the data is stored?
Yeah, so within the administration center for Office 365 as a whole, within here, we've got a section under settings called org settings. And under here, we've got a buried away, they keep moving it around. So we're under organization profile, we have one called data location. And within here, you'll see where your data location is currently set. And you can change this by requesting you can request a ticket with Microsoft to move it into UK if you only want it within that. And you can see, as an example, when I choose data residency, I've got this tick box where I can say I want all of my data to be moved. So that's kind of where you do that option.
Okay. Is there a minimum level of users need to purchase a Microsoft 365 license? So is it useful for sole traders or small organizations with less than 10 people?
I think Office 365, the Microsoft 365 business license that I showed at the beginning would be beneficial to anyone. So within that platform, you'd get Teams, so you could invite your customers and suppliers. You could use the video communications for new sales opportunities, and you'd get things like OneDrive. So OneDrive is a place to put your personal documents, and I've redirected my desktop documents and pictures into the OneDrive. So that means that I've always got a backup of my data. So definitely useful for one user all the way up to 10,000 users, really.
Okay. Is it possible to create an interactive question poll using Teams while you're presenting?
We can within a team itself, so I can come into here and I can do @forms, and then I can basically create a poll. So this interface allows me to do a poll, and I can basically say get people to feedback on that. So it's kind of not while I'm presenting, but if I do @form, you can see I can say, what do you think of this? And I could do 1, 2, 3. And then that'll post off and automatically create a form. It takes a minute or so, but yeah, that kind of thing is possible.
Okay. When I add an external contact with a government email, it adds them as a guest account. I can't seem to call or message them using their actual email. Therefore, they keep missing notifications from the group, and they can't see the messages easily. Is that a council setting restriction, or is it an internal Teams problem, do you think? Now, I know this may be getting a bit deep.
It could be both, to be honest. It could be that the user is getting the messages, but they're not switching into this mode in the top right-hand corner, so they might be lost there. Or it could be being blocked by the council or the government then as well.
Okay. Let's see. Can Teams be used as a hybrid phone system using a SIP trunk?
So there are, in the plans that are available for voice, there's 2 plans. There's this business voice, which is basically Microsoft handle everything, and then there's the business voice without a call plan, and that enables third-party companies to plug in their own solutions, which may work with a hybrid SIP trunk.
Okay. And is all the content stored in Teams stored in the Microsoft cloud? I guess yes. All the documentation and everything, really.
Yeah, everything would be stored. So again, in that data location setting, that's where everything would be. And then obviously in the data residency, you're able to change that as well.
Okay. And finally now, would you recommend migrating project documentation from a central repository into Teams?
We do that a lot. So yes, I would. But I would recommend that you think about the structure before you do that. So I wouldn't recommend you just throw it all in. So for that specific scenario, are you going to create a team for each project? Are you going to create a team for projects and then have sub-channels? So the most important thing I'd suggest before you do that is think about the structure and then base that decision on there. And then there's a product called SharePoint Migration Tool, which allows us to really simply move things over into Teams. So there is ways to do that as well.
Okay. Well, one that's just popped in. Is it possible to merge 2 tenants?
No, there's no merge button. So it's basically a migration. So you would need to choose one of the tenants that you're going to move everything into, and then you'd have to use probably a third-party migration tool. All depends on what you're moving.
Okay. And is it possible to invite people outside of a team into a private channel?
They have to be a member of the team to be able to be added to a private channel. So you can't just be in the private channel without being a member of the team first. So if that's to provide sharing of files, you would need to look at a SharePoint site where you have different permissions to do that, but you can't have a private channel that way now.
Okay. There we go. And I don't know if anybody's got any more questions, but one more coming through. Do you get any problems if people exclude people from Teams? I guess that's a social thing, really. If that you need to make sure that there's a bit of governance around who has access to these teams and who isn't, because there could be some office politics going on there.
Yeah, so that's kind of what we said in the department mapping and the kind of thinking about the structure in the beginning. A part of that piece is updating your policies to make sure that you're covering kind of bullying, exclusion things, and making sure that people are aware of that.
Okay. Are you able to open more than one Teams screen at a time? So video call on one side and files and stuff on the other side?
Yep, they just literally rolled that out now. So it probably might not be available in your tenant, but in the next 3 weeks or something, you'll be able to have multiple windows for Teams.
Okay. And okay, we're looking at how hard is it to move over from Skype for Business to Teams? Is it a big problem?
The training is the biggest piece, so letting people know about that. But in the Teams admin center, we have a section here called, mine's got Teams Upgrade. You might find actually, if you haven't been in here, Microsoft might just have a date in here saying we're going to flip you to Teams only mode. So I check that, because we've had a lot of people where they've just been flipped to Teams and they've had no warning. But if you want to, when you come into this section, you have the ability to go to the settings section, and then we have one here called Teams Upgrade, and you'll then be able to change your upgrade to Teams only mode then. So you can see here we've got 14 days for our upgrade, but we've already got an upgrade, so I'm not sure what that's on about. But when you guys go in there, you'll see a date similar to this, and you either want to postpone it or plan that effectively.
Okay. And will Teams take over the SharePoint functionality ultimately?
We see Teams is a fantastic kind of collaboration tool, and it's really good for interacting with people. But SharePoint, I think, is a very good intranet platform, and it kind of very good for static type information. So putting your policies in there, building apps like leave request and using Power Apps and stuff. I think SharePoint has a place, but I think the ability to be able to put your intranet on the left-hand side may negate the need to have a browser where you go to this and do that.
Okay, and can you monitor who's online and when they're online to make sure they're working, especially with so many people home working these days?
So you're able to, we're able to go into chat here, and we can go on to someone here, and we can choose the 3 dots, and we can choose turn on notifications. So if I wanted to track Kieran, I could click the 3 dots and I could choose notify when available. There's also an audit log in 365, which we can go into the admin center, and we can see a full list of changes. My own personal experience, though, we work remotely 99% or now 100% of the time, but prior to this, we always worked probably 90% of the time from home. And I think if you implement the right policies, so you have your department checks and you have your daily catch-up calls, you can really negate the need to have to monitor people. So with our calls that we have in the morning, with our lunchtime call and then a call at the afternoon and this daily communications, it's pretty immediately apparent if people are active and working. And then if people aren't working, they're not going to be part of those calls. It's quite easy to catch people out. So I'd say by building the processes and governance, that's something that would naturally come rather than having to have a monitoring tool per se.
Okay. And I'll make it the last question now. So can you join the G Suite meeting using Google Meet from Teams? So it's a bit of a hybrid question, I guess.
So Teams, Zoom, and Cisco, and maybe some Zoom, have all announced that they're integrating a collaboration tool. So I don't know if Google have announced it, but they're all basically making it very easy. So if you're a Zoom person, you'll be able to join the Teams meeting from Zoom. So they're all working together to make it so you don't have to worry about all these different apps. So as part of that, then hopefully Google will do the same and you won't need to, yes, you'll be able to join.
Okay. That looks sounds like a good way forward if at all possible. So having said that, I think that's all that we have to say for this evening. Thank you everybody for joining. We'd be very grateful for you all joining, and I hope that you found it interesting. I certainly have. The talk from you, as always, has been absolutely great. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Cheers all.